right? I can't actually do an average, but I could. How could I reword this just so that it is a numerical question, or it has numerical data? So, how many students eat in the lunchroom typically? Or typically, how many students eat in the lunchroom? On average, how many students eat in the lunchroom? Notice by adding actually in that idea of bringing in their own lunch, you're making it into a category. So very close, but that's something we would want to notice, right? What about here? From the numbers 1 and 2, how many people in this class would choose 1? What's the survey question?
Oh, 1 or 2.
You choose 1 or 2. Is that numerical or categorical then?
Categorical.
That'd be categorical. You're choosing a category.
So if it's like a this or that, it's category.
A lot of times I think so, yeah. I don't want to say yes all the time because I just can't think of a case where, yeah. Yeah, so if you're picking one thing or another, right, you're probably looking at categorical data. Notice, think about that survey question. You can grab it if you want. Think about that survey question. Would you get a categorical response or would you get a numerical response? How many cars are usually in the parking lot? Is that statistical? How many cars are usually in the parking lot? Statistical, yes. Is that numerical? Yes. Do notice this one word of usually is key here. Because if you were to just ask how many cars are in the parking lot, I'd have to go count them, but there's only one number of cars in the parking lot, right? But by making it usually, right, you would look at multiple days and you would get a different answer on each of those days probably. And so we'd expect variability there, right? How many children are in your exhibit today? Is that statistical? I don't know. Doesn't matter. Just how many children are in your exhibit today? There's only going to be one answer there, right? We don't know what the answer is, but there's only one possible answer. How can I make that statistical? How many children? Well, even this week would just be like today.
It would be like a month or like a year.
Normally, how many children are in your exhibit, right? Notice, even by saying how many children are in your exhibit this year, there's only going to be one response, right? But throughout the course of a year, typically how many students do you have in your exhibit, right? We have to look at multiple things to get that response in there. How many days does it snow in a year in Alabama? That's borderline, right? You might want to say something like how many days, or typically how many days does it snow in a year in Alabama? What? But here's the thing, maybe it's only 1, but could we get a different number of snow days each year?
Yes.
So there would still be variability, right? Even if it was 1 every single year, there's still the chance of it being something different, right? So that would be statistical, right? Okay. How many siblings do you have? No, that's a survey question, but would we expect different responses from each person? Right? And so that's something to keep in mind. All right, so I'm going to stop it here. I'm going to send out one more to get some more good discussion going. Now this time, create a non-statistical question that would need categorical data.
Once again by yourself?
Yep, once again by yourselves. I know, it really is. It is. It's not, there's a lot of things that you could ask. Think about the different non-statistical categorical questions we had earlier. It just needs to be a category, and what does it mean to be non-statistical? Ask that question. Ask yourself that question. Okay, I'm gonna pause it here. So how many people drive to school than people who ride the bus? So how many more people drive to school than people who ride the bus?
Yeah.
I might, yeah, because you would, yeah. It is a number, so you're comparing the number of students. Now, I don't know though. The survey question would be categorical. That one gets a little dicey. Well, okay, how about this? What month is duck season? Yeah, there's a duck season, right?
Yeah.
Is it categorical? I mean, it's a month, right? Is it non-statistical? Is there variability expected or no?
No, there's not.
There's not, so that works. What year did Avatar come out in theaters? Does that work?
13. It does.
Yes, it works, but it is.
I didn't know even. Actually, I do know. It was 2009.
Dude.
It was
It's the best.
Christmas of my freshman year of high school or of college.
I get it confused.
How old are you?
It's the blue. I assume they're referring to the Blue People one. We tried not to talk about the Avatar live action movie because that was a bad movie. The show is so good, and that movie was awful.
That's the one about the elements, isn't it?
Yeah.
I like that movie.
It's okay.
The movie? I like the show. That movie was a travesty, in my opinion. If you like the movie, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to trash talk your opinions. But anyways, so are there 22 kids in class today?
No. There's more.
But the question is it non-statistical and is it categorical?
It's good. Yes.
I mean, is it categorical? The response would either be yes or
No.
no, right? And then is it non-statistical? Well, there's only one correct answer, so it's non-statistical.
That's a good
What
one.
is it numerical kind of?
Maybe categorical, right? Are there 22 kids in class today? The only response is either yes or no, and there's only one correct response there, right? How about do you like Nike or Under Armour? Is that non-statistical? So here's, I would say, for me, that's a survey question, right? So Mackenzie, do you prefer Nike or Under Armour?
No.
Under Armour, right? Jaden, Nike or Under Armour? Nike. There's variability there, right? The way I change that, though, is I say, does Jaden prefer Nike or Under Armour, right? Because then I make it only about one person, and there's only one correct response. Does that make sense? And so that's the difference. Again, same thing about baseball or football. Right? There's variability in the way that's worded, but if I just say, does Clay prefer baseball or football? Clay, do you prefer baseball or football?
Football.
All right, is there any other possible response? It's only about him, right? So there's no variability there. All right, does that make sense?
That is true.
Okay. How many kids drive a Ford? Yes, there is a how many there, but the question would be, do you drive a Ford? The response would either be yes or no. Or the question could be, what type of car do you drive? And then still that's a category, right? So just because there's a how many doesn't make it numerical. The question is, are you measuring or are you getting categorical responses? What are your questions, comments, or concerns before we continue with today? No.
It's a lot tricky
To what?
figuring out if it's numerical and
Are you, well, I mean, it's this, it's what we broke it down to, statistical versus non-statistical. Is there variability or is there not?
I know, but like for like numerical, we have like most people on count.
But notice we just looked at how many that was categorical. The question is the response a category or is the response a number? A number that's been measured, right? That's the question. Okay, so we're going to look at lesson 1 just briefly. We're just going to get on the getting started here. But I do want to point out, oh yeah, flip one page in your textbook. M5-65 is where you want to be right now. Right? This is at the beginning of every single lesson. It tells you the learning goals. You'll notice a lot of my learning goals line up to this. And it also has key terms. I meant to make a graphic organizer this weekend and I totally forgot to do that. But Key terms, you want to pay attention to these things. These are words and ideas you have to know. But here we are with a survey, right? So 2 quick things, right? I want you to always pay attention to the remember. These are things that are supposed to be background, but based on what we were taught, may not be background. So a population represents all the possible data that are of interest in a survey, right? A sample is a subset of data, right? So if I was talking about Hillcrest High School, the population would be Hillcrest High School. This class would be a sample. Does that make sense? So population is everything. The sample is the smallest part. And the population really comes down to how you define it, which is what we're going to see right here. You can use data to help answer questions about the world. The specific question that you were trying to answer or the information that you were trying to gather is called a characteristic of interest. You can use data to help determine which prescribed medication is most effective, which television show is most popular with teenagers, or how often doctors wash their hands. One way of collecting data is to use a sample survey. Just like the surveys I sent out to the calculators the first couple days of school, right? Where I asked you questions and I collected data from you. So the questions that we're about to look at are based on this right here. A researcher wants to design a sample survey to determine the amount of time that U.S. teenagers between the ages of 16 to 18 spend online each day. Characteristic of interest, defined up here again. Identify the characteristic of interest in this sample survey. Then identify the population that the researcher is trying to measure with this sample survey. Take 2 minutes. Just talk about it within your groups. We'll write about it together. If you have time, go ahead and write it. But at least get your ideas out there.
Wait, what's the question again?
It's the 2 questions in the textbook, numbers 1 and 2, and it's based on that survey that I bought. That's the textbook. Oh, guys, next page in the book, sorry. I forgot to say it. This is on page 66. If you didn't realize when I flipped it, right? This is all on page 66.
It's a placeholder. You sounded me as fucking
Do we write it down?
You can start writing it down. Yeah, it's your book.
Hold it.
Yeah.
So you are gonna write it down?
I did it first.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so let's talk about it. Someone raise your hand, volunteer. What is the characteristic of interest in this survey? Deja.
The time we spend online.
Time we spend online. Does anybody want to push back on that or add on to that? Aaliyah? Time that we spend online daily. Okay. So is that, do we want to add that detail of daily in?
No.
Okay. I mean, it does say each day, so it's not about a weekly thing or a monthly thing. Anybody want to push back or add any more details on?
I agree with you.
Okay. So, time spent online daily, right? That's the piece of information we're trying to collect data on, right? The amount of time spent online daily. So somebody else, what is the population of interest? What you got, Alexandria? 16 to 18-year-olds? Does anybody want to add on or push back on that?
I agree.
Anybody want to add on? Bree? Is it important that we include US here? Yes, right? We're not talking about Russians. We're not talking about British. We're not talking about Spanish. We're talking about U.S., right? So 16 to 18-year-old American teens or Americans, right? We want to include that information, 16 to 18-year-old Americans. All right? So we got to identify the characteristic of interest. We got to identify the population. All right? So here with number 3, Huck and Patch were discussing the population of the survey. Huck said the population is all 16 to 18-year-olds in the U.S. Patch said it's the population is all teenagers in the U.S. Who's correct? Okay, Huck. This is what a lot of us are saying. So what's the issue with Patch?
Because that's 13 days.
This is generalized.
Yeah.
Is this too generalized? What's he including that he shouldn't?
Younger, like
All
the
teenagers.
all teenagers.
All teenagers.
The 13.
So we
15,
shouldn't have what?
13 to 15.
All right, shouldn't have 13 to 15-year-olds. Oh, and 19, you're right.
Oh.
There we go, thank you. So number 4, because we're running out of time, I'm going to quickly do this all together, but write a survey question or questions that the researcher could use to collect data from the participants in the survey. Well, what's the first thing that researchers would have to establish? Something even before that. Huh? Say that one more time, Kennedy. Don't we need to know if they're 16 to 18? So what can we ask?
How old are you?
How old are you? Are you between the ages of 16 and 18? Something like that, right? So how old are you?
How much time a day do you spend on?
Let me ask you a question.
What if they don't have
Do
a
you-
phone?
Well, does it say it has to be on a phone?
No, it's just online in
It
general.
just says online. It could be on a computer. And the response would just be 0 minutes. But here's the thing. Do you know how much you actually spend every single day?
Screen time tells me every day.
So you can do screen time, but I would probably say maybe an even better survey question would just be, how much time have you spent online today? That's an easier question for teenagers to answer. Does that make sense? But yeah, you could ask the question, hey, how much time do you usually spend online each day? Or just, how much time have you spent online today? And what would we do with all those responses?
You would get the
We might get an average, we
Get
might
an
graph
average.
it.
Yeah.
They don't do it by each age, 16, 17.
You could, but that's not the question that we're trying to answer, right? Does that make sense? So yes, you could split it up, and sometimes you might, but that's just not the question being asked. All right, so we're going to get further into that lesson 1. We should finish it tomorrow, and then get into lesson 2. So you will need volume 2 for a whole lot more even tomorrow. Assignments, none yet. We will probably have our first assignment, like practice assignment, tomorrow or at the latest on Wednesday. Tomorrow we're going to keep examining study design. Really, actually, look at study design for the first time. And the principle of random selection.
So bring volume 2.
Bring volume 2 with you tomorrow.
Dude,
Yep.
let's go get some Saconis for real.
So when you got clown, I would never get to go to
That's what I'm saying here. We'll have your first assignment tomorrow or maybe
All the older kids up in the hard.
yes, you may
They
get
all got
yourself
very
right now.
depends on what the popular things out of.
It just depends on how far we get over here.
Leave it up, yep.
And make sure you're
Do you have work tomorrow, Lexi? Alright.
But every other day this week I did.
Alright. Could probably do homework together again tomorrow.
Yeah. Oh, 1 second. Who's asking? You'll be right here again. Sorry, I just have to move. Every time. Huh? He is. He's just not here today. Here we go. Move this down. I'm sorry you feel this way. I don't.
I wish it was
I know it feels so good.
I wish it was cold there.
See, I'll never be able to make everyone happy, but I'm gonna be. You answer the survey question first, then you can go. The bathrooms are probably. I mean, you can go check, but you gotta be on time. Either be on time or answer the survey question or the bell ringer first. Hey,
Yeah. You got replaced.
Jerry, just
Yeah, you got replaced.
I told you that yesterday.
Oh, we did.
I told you, I said somebody took your
Wesley.
seat. We had two.
I got some shit for you. Okay, so you know who Clayne and Langdon High School are?
Just tell him you did.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, please notice we have instructions on the board. We need to get ready for class.
These two boys were
No, I should have a space for you today, right?
walking through the door. He's been going for 4 days now. I just not the
I said,
You can sit right here.
Hey, Jordan, here.
He was doing that last year. He was doing that.
What you gonna say to the class? No. That's a hard no.